Hi, this is Jane from SafeNet AT. In this video, I'm going to be showing you the integration of a Cohesity cluster and SafeNet AT's KeySecure for Government Key Manager. As you can see on the screen here, I have an integration guide, and I just wanted to let you know this is available. It has very detailed step-by-step instructions. Should you be doing the integration and you run into trouble, please contact SafeNet AT customer support and they can provide you with this document. So now let's get started with the integration. What I'm going to do is on KeySecure, I'm going to show you how it's configured rather than going through the entire configuration. We have other videos that exist to help you with step-by-step configuration for setting up for a KMIP integration, which is what this integration is. So let me just show you how it's configured. On the Security tab, Local CAs, you can see that I have created a local certificate authority that is going to act as the root of trust in this integration. It's called Integration CA. In the Trusted CA List page, in the default Trusted CA List profile, I have made the integration CA Trusted. This list will be assigned to the KMIP server, and it will basically tell the server what root CA certificates to trust. I also created an SSL certificate request, had it signed by the local CA, and then installed it back, so it is a server certificate that is active. And as an active certificate, I was able to assign it when I was creating a key server, a KMIP key server here with this certificate. Other configuration information on this key server. It is listening to port 5696, which is the KMIP default. It's currently set to listen to all network interfaces, but it only has one, so it's essentially just listening to the single network interface. And if I cancel out of here and go to Properties, you can see that these two default options are automatically selected. You'll want to leave those set. The connection timeout is an idle timer associated with the TLS connection. The default is 3600 seconds or 1 hour. So if after an hour the TLS session is still up and it's been inactive, KeySecure will drop the connection. Down here under authentication, password authentication is not being used. Client certificate authentication is set for used for SSL session and username, so it is going to be authenticating based on username. The username will be determined by this field, which says what field in the client certificate contains the username. And there are several options here. We are using common name, which is very common. It doesn't have to be common name. You can use any of these fields, but this is what makes sense for our configuration. And I'll explain that a little more in a second. This is the Trusted CA List profile, which we are setting to the default profile, making that integration CA Trusted. And we are not going to be doing source IP authentication. So that is the configuration of the KMIP server. And I'll cancel out of that. Now the last step on KeySecure, having to do with this common name authentication that's going to be taking place, is that we need a local user configured to authenticate that common name. So if I click on local authentication, I'm going to create a user that is going to contain the common name that goes in that client certificate for the Cohesity cluster. And I strongly encourage that you use a common name or whatever field you're using that it uniquely identifies the Cohesity cluster. Now I use the last three digits of the IP address as an identifier, so I know exactly which cluster this is. So Cohesity 252, and then you do have to enter a password. It is not used, so you don't have to write it down, but you do have to enter it. And click Save. And there is our local user, and that is going to correspond with the common name in the client certificate. So for the purposes of this integration, I just want to show you the activity log here on KeySecure. So device, log viewer, activity log. This is the KMIP activity log. You will see any activity that happens with the key servers here. I also want to show you the statistics page. This is where you can see connection statistics as they involve TLS. So if you're having problems, you can go to this statistics page and look to see if you're failing the SSL handshake, or if it's successful. It's useful for debug at the TLS level. Down here, you can see that we have no open connections. If we did have a connection up with the cluster, we would see that. So this is a good place to come to see if you do have an existing TLS connection with the Cohesity cluster. Okay, so with that, that is the configuration of KeySecure, and I am now going to switch to the Cohesity cluster. So this is a virtual instance of Cohesity. It's release 6.01. It is completely not configured right now, so we're going to be starting from scratch, and I will be showing you how to configure it for encryption. And click Get Started, and there's a lot of information to be filled out here, so I'm going to go ahead and do that, and then I will come back. Okay, I have these filled out. I'm just going to talk about a couple of them. First, this is the cluster name. That can be anything you want. I am just making it Cohesity 252 to correspond with the common name and the local user. It does not have to be the same. That's purely for consistency. And down here at the bottom is where you enable encryption. So I'm going to go ahead and click this, and you'll see we now have a couple of more configuration options. The rotation period, when you set it here, make sure you know your security policy and what this should be. You will not get an opportunity to change this after you've set it here. I'm going to go ahead and let it stay at the default, but it will determine how often the keys are rotated on the Cohesity cluster. And there's one key per storage domain, and there are a couple of other internal keys that are used, but this will determine how often they are updated. And the last option here is to select FIPS, which means you are only going to be using FIPS approved ciphers. That's always desirable, so set that on and click Create Cluster. This is going to take a couple of minutes. I'll let it do its thing, and then I will come back. Okay, that part of the configuration is complete. If I click this, it is still not ready yet, so give it another minute or so, and then we can log back in. Okay, I've refreshed again, and now we can see the UI is available for login. License agreement, and then I'll have to get the license key. Okay, after entering the license key, I land on the Cohesity dashboard. And the page of interest here for us is Platform, Cluster. It takes us to the cluster summary page. Of note here, you can see the key management system here at the bottom is internal. And what we want to do is configure the external key manager. So we're going to come up here and click on Key Management System. So up here at the top, they ask you to select the server type. Currently SafeNet is the only one, so we leave that as is. Here's the server name. This is the name of the key management server. You can call it anything you want. I'm going to just call it KeySecure Primary, as that's the name of the KeySecure we're going to connect with. Protocol version is asking you for the version of KMIP to use. There are three options. KMIP 1.1, 1.2, and 1.3 is available. I've tested with all three. All three work, so I'm just going to select KMIP 1.3 as it's the most recent version. And the server IP address, I'd like you to be very careful with this. You only get one chance to set it. You will not be able to come back and correct it, so make sure you're entering the right address, you have no typos, and you know it's the correct address. Here, the port needs to match what the KMIP server port was on KeySecure, which was the default of 5696 for KMIP, so we're going to leave that at that default. And here is where we now select the certificates to set up the TLS session with KeySecure. To save time in this video, I have already created these certificates and the key, and I used OpenSSL per Cohesity recommendations, so I am just going to go ahead and select the files that I've already created. Again, our integration guide contains step-by-step instructions for this. So I'm going to go ahead and select the certificate file, and then the key file. Now please keep in mind this key is not encrypted, okay? You need to treat it like a secret, so you'll want to keep a copy of it, but store it securely somewhere so that it can't be compromised, because it is the private key for the Cohesity cluster. And finally we'll do the CA certificate file. Okay, so that is all that needs to be configured, and as soon as I click Save, the cluster is going to reach out to KeySecure to establish a TLS session and to also communicate with it via KMIP. So what we should see is we should see a connection established and be viewable on the device statistics page on KeySecure, and we should also see KMIP activity. I'll click Save, and returning to this page, you can see that the key management system now shows connected. So that's a good sign. It worked. It was able to communicate. Now I want to caution you, this is not a real-time status. In the future, if you come back to this page and you see connected, it does not necessarily mean the connection is established or that KeySecure is even reachable. It just means that initially it was communicated with and it was able to connect to it. Okay, so let's go back to KeySecure and see what the activity log is now showing. And here you can see that 2 messages have come up from Cohesity 252, and they are just queries. And this is simply, it's starting the process of doing the communications. It's established that it can connect, and what we should see in a couple of minutes are keygen requests coming up from the cluster, where it is going to request that KeySecure make 4 keys. 1 key is for a default storage domain, and 3 other keys are for internal use. So I'm going to give that a couple of minutes until that's done, and then I will show you the keys themselves. Okay, upon refresh, you can see that we now have more KMIP activity, and these are the keygen requests that you would expect to see, and they're followed by a key info and a key export. So basically the cluster has said, please create me a key. Okay, now give me the key. And this is what you expect to see. And now if I go to the statistics page, I also want to show you that we have an open TLS connection. And that connection will stay up indefinitely from the Cohesity side. Cohesity will not do anything to drop that connection. However, on the KeySecure side, the key server is currently set up to go Properties. This connection timeout is set to 1 hour. So if that TLS connection is not used for any reason, KeySecure will drop the connection after an hour. You can make it persistent by disabling this and changing it to 0. And that TLS connection will stay up indefinitely, as Cohesity will never drop it. So I just wanted to mention that. I want to mention one more thing. This is something you might see at some point, and I just want to point it out so that you are not concerned as to what's going on. If I go back to the cluster page and I go to storage domains and I add a storage domain, it's going to immediately create it, and what it's also going to do is you are going to see that a new key was generated here. We got another message, a new key gen request coming up here at 15:15 and exporting again. That's what you would normally expect to see. Now if I go to Device and I go to Services and I restart the NAE server, that is the KMIP server, click Restart. If I go back to the statistics page, you'll see that there's no longer an open connection. Now if I come back here and I add a storage domain, you're going to see this error. The reason this error was thrown was because the TLS connection was not there. If I simply close this error and create it again, it works. So after it threw the error, it established the TLS connection, and then it was able to create the domain. So I just wanted to point out to you why that error was occurring, and if you were to, in theory, change that key server setting to never drop the session, set it to 0 here, you wouldn't see that error in theory. As long as nothing else happened to cause that connection to drop, you wouldn't see that error. So one last thing here, I want to show you the keys. These are all the keys that were created for the Cohesity cluster. You can see the owner here is Cohesity 252, and that is a very easy way to identify the keys with this cluster. And again, that is the local user, and that is the common name in the certificate, and that goes in the owner field here. So it's good to have that owner field be reflective of the cluster in a meaningful fashion. If I open this key and look at the attributes, I just want to point this out. This is the cluster ID, and the cluster ID can also be seen on the cluster page right here. So this corresponds with the attribute in the key. So that's it. This is an overview of the integration. Again, if you need more help, please contact us for the integration guide, and thanks for watching.